Hey, what up, y'all? What up, what up, what up? I am Lou, live today on Hanging with Lou. And trying to just get, I'm actually running a little bit behind. The goal was to be live at 8:15. Again, I'm about, 11 minutes behind. So let me go ahead and get things set up and going, right? So give me about a minute or two, and then we'll get started. Let's see. Get things set up and going, right? So give me about a minute or two, and then we'll get started. Let's see. There's just a few things that I normally do. Just trying to get those things, kind of get those things going. But we'll get started again in 1 minute. All right, I'm almost done. Almost done. I'm just trying to get again a few things in order. All right, cool. Damn it, I forgot to change the name of my. Damn, man, I hate that. I need to. Well, so I did. I've been doing some changes on Streamlabs. Um, I don't know why, man. It's so initially I was using Restream, and with Restream, I believe whenever I go live, I'm able to change the title of my stream and that kind of information. But right now I'm just strictly going live on YouTube only, strictly YouTube. And I don't think that's the case, man. I don't think it allowed me to do that. Oh yeah, one other thing too. I actually forgot to. I was going to record my session as well. So there have been a few streams where there've been some good context as well. So it's the whole. If I recorded, I could get additional content, right? Um, all right, so let me go ahead and save this. All right, so I think that should have fixed it. There it goes. It did fix it. Cool. Um, okay. Either way, so I think it's good. All right, guys. Those of you who are joining, what up? What up? I am Lou. So one of the new things I started doing, um, one of the things I've been doing every Friday, I have a live stream of drinking with Lou. So I'm a tequila guy. So I try new tequilas. I drink it. We talk, and we talk code, right? So we talk Python specifically. We review. We solve code problems. We solve any issue that you may have, and then we do just different things as well. One of the things that we've been doing in a couple of the live streams in the last week or two have been, kind of put together a Flask application, Python Flask, ultimately doing some data scraping, loading the data to a website, database, and then ultimately displaying that data back. Again, we just a lot of different things, man. So that's kind of what we do. Let me fix my mic real quick. Okay, that should be a lot better. So again, man, those of you who are new, who are joining, who are not familiar, I'm a tech guy. I'm a software engineer. I code, and I make a lot of videos specifically related to Python. Python not the only language that I code in, but it's what I want to call my primary language. And the reason why I say primary is that's the language that I enjoy to code in. Have code in C#. Of course, I do code in JavaScript. A few other languages, but it's just the language that I deal with the majority of the time. And then also the language, like with my channel, I have kind of decided I want my channel to be very focused going forward, Python programming specifically. So that's kind of where I've been focused at. I did get a request from a viewer. He may be coming a little bit late because I think he'll get. So when we do our live streams on Fridays, it is at 9 p.m. Central. On Tuesdays, which is today, it's at 8. It's supposed to be 8:15. Again, a little bit late, but I think he actually emailed me saying that he will be on. He wants to kind of review some data pipeline processes that we're going to do in AWS. So we kind of been working on that, some of the live streams. So once he joins, probably won't be till 9 o'clock. We'll get started on that. Until then, we'll just hang out and we're going to talk. One of the things that I'm actually going to be, oh yeah, and also too, so it's actually about to be, it is going to be the end of the month. So I'm going to be giving away, I'm a hardware guy, again, tech guy. I have all kinds of hardware, multiple keyboards, mices, CPUs, maybe 1 or 2 extra GPUs. I'm actually going to buy a GPU on my workstation. Kind of hard to tell, but I have another computer in my office, and which is my workstation. So I'm streaming right now off my gaming station, which is right here next to me. Kind of hard to see. This, I have a 6900 XT GPU, which is awesome, dude. I game on Halo Infinite, and when I was gaming on before I used to stream on CS:GO, and I was using my 5700 XT, and it's fine for CS:GO, but once I started streaming for Halo Infinite, dude, that ate up so much of my resources, like GPU wise. So I had to get a new GPU, which I did, and that GPU is awesome. Oh, there it goes. We got, let's see, Python the developers on. All right, no, man, cool. So that's cool. All right, so now that you're on, we can go ahead and get started, man. Michael Love Jr. Farts in your face and leaves. That's kind of odd. Are you saying you're seeing something showing up, I guess, on the live stream? farts in your face. Yeah, not sure, but all right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. Again, those of you who are enjoying the live stream, man, appreciate it. Again, any tech related question that you have, Python developer has something that he emailed me, so we're gonna walk through that process, which relates to AWS data pipeline. So ultimately, we're gonna be extracting data from Sharepoint, moving it over to an S3 bucket. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna create some AWS glue processes to ultimately extract the data from the S3 bucket, the files in the S3 bucket, and then we're gonna load that data to a Redshift database. And then ultimately the final result is going to be Tableau connected to the database to be able to query that data. So I think that we could kind of go through very quickly. So that's what we're going to be going through. Again, requested by Python developer. If you have any requests or any questions, by all means, man, leave it on the chat. Be more than, we'll try to get to it today if we can. And yeah, man, let's go ahead and get started, guys. So let's see. All right. So those of y'all who are just joining, last week we talked about how do we move data from Sharepoint over to an S3 bucket. So we kind of went through the process of building a job using Visual Cron. So it's a tool that I use for like automating certain jobs, right? So we'll go through that. I'll show that in a minute if you're interested in what that is and how that works. But nevertheless, the main piece now is that we want to work on is the getting the AWS the glue job working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to AWS Glue. Also, one of the things that I'm going to do is, let me open it up real quick. Let me connect to my Redshift environment. Then I have this dev database on there. All right. So right now it's empty. We don't have nothing on there, right? So let's see. So let me open up, see which file you're referring to. I don't have Tableau installed, so we could see what we could do on that perhaps later on. But let me take a look at your CSV file. Okay, so I do see your file CSV. All right, cool. So let me just go ahead and save it somewhere right quick. And what I'll do is I'm going to drop that file into the Sharepoint site, and then of course we'll just build a job to kind of pull from there. And so let me do that real quick. So let's see, let me save this. All right, cool. So now that I have that saved, let me go ahead and connect. YouTube.com. I think that's where I put it under. Let me see. Where's my Sharepoint? There it goes. Yep, there it goes. It was this guy. So in this case, I have what's called YouTube 2022. So I'm just gonna delete all of these guys, right? So I don't need this. Let me just go ahead and delete it. Then of course I'm gonna drop the file that you provided in there. And there it goes. Boom. All right. So now that we got that. So the tool that I use is called Table Plus. So when it comes to like development, it may not. I don't think this is the best tool for that. Like modeling, database modeling. There's another tool I use for that, like DB Schema, that has a lot more features. But when it comes to just querying data from the database, right? Just viewing the tables, viewing like the view or the procedure code, or just querying, like running real quick queries. This tool I love because it is fast. Like the auto completion and all of that, it's like instant. Everything's very fast. I'm a big fan of it. Now it's not cheap. You got to pay for it. Well, it is cheap. My bad. Let me rephrase it. It is a cheap software, not expensive. You got to pay for it. I want to say it's like $59 or something, $50, but it's well worth it, man. I've been using it for a while, and I like it a lot. But again, if you're more doing a lot of database design, modeling, that like the database schema, designing and trying to do all of that, that's not the tool for that. There's other tools that are designed for that, and I wouldn't use that for that kind of stuff. But since I just want to view the data, query the data, that's ideal. All right, so now that we got the file in here, so I think we're good there. What I'm gonna do is let me go back to AWS. All right. So there's a few things that we have to do, right? For example, there's some stuff that have done already. So there's gonna be stuff you're gonna see. None of it, I don't think it's sensitive, so it should be fine. But nevertheless, though, one of the things that we would have to do first is we're going to do a connection, right? So assuming that you're starting from scratch, everything will be empty. So we will have to do a database connection. So that's what I'm going to do first. We're going to do database connection. I already got a few for some other services that I'm running, but let's create a new one for the one that we're going to be dealing with. So we got to give it a name. I'm going to call this dev I am Lou, right? That just, you call it whatever name you want to call it. That's kind of my name that I'm giving it. The next thing is Amazon Redshift. Again, if you're connecting to RDS instance, connect that. If you're connecting to some sort of other database, Azure or something like that, JDBC could be it. But in my case, it's Redshift. So the cluster, so here's the thing, when in AWS, you got to create a Redshift cluster first. Once you got that created, you'll see that show up in the dropdown. Now, keep in mind, though, this is very, very key what I'm about to say. When you create a Redshift cluster, make sure that you're putting it under the right region. I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe if you put the Redshift cluster in a different region, maybe you may not be able to connect. I know I have had some issues before on certain services, so just keep that in mind. It may not be an issue, it may be an issue. I'm trying to think if it is with Redshift. I know it is an issue for what is it? What did I have to deal with where I had that issue? Because they were in different regions, and I had to do some workarounds to make it work. But either way, just you may have to play around with that. Once you select, whatever cluster you have created, again, this is part of the just setting up a Redshift environment, getting that spin up and running. You're gonna give it a name. In my case, I called it Share Redshift Prod. That's the name I gave it. You give yours whatever you want. My database is called Dev, right? So again, if I go back to my instance, these are the databases that I have today. So of course dev is right there. So it'll be whatever database you create for Redshift. In my case, dev. Then of course put in username and password. Again, when you create a new when you end up creating a new cluster of Redshift, you're gonna have to create username, credentials, all that stuff. So let me go ahead and put that in real quick. All right, cool. So now that I have that, I'm gonna hit next. Yep, all my information is good. Close out of it. All right, cool. So now I have my connection, which is dev I am Lou. So the next thing that I need to do is, so number one is connection. Number two, I'm gonna create a database group. Pretty much this is where, as you create tables, you're gonna put these tables under specific database groups, right? You could build yours on how you want. There's different ways to do it. The way I'm gonna do mine is I'm gonna create one for S3 bucket values that I'm gonna. So pretty much, if you have an S3 bucket, and let's say you have 5 different subfolders in there, and each one is different for different file that you're dealing with. So that, for me, that would be considered 5 different tables that I will create, because they're all different files, right? One folder could be for sales, one folder could be for cause, one folder could be for employees. I mean, whatever your data set is, right, could be different for each thing. And so the way I'm gonna create 2 databases. Now you don't have to. You technically just create one and put everything in that one bucket. You could do it that way. Normally I create 2. I think in this case I may just create one, though. Probably makes sense because we're only dealing with one data set and one table that's going to get created in Redshift for now that we're migrating over. But just kind of keep that in mind. So I'm going to call this whatever name you want to give it. I'm calling it dev I am Lou DB. Just call it that. So it's whatever name you want to give it. So again, connection first, database second. Now that we have both of those created, let me go to Redshift. My bad, not Redshift. Let me go to my S3 bucket real quick. So let's see. So I created this bucket called I am Lou 001 test, right? Again, just random bucket that I created. I have a subfolder called staging. And then of course I have what's called cause and sales. Since we're not, for right now, we're only dealing with one file, I'm gonna just delete all of these, and ultimately what I'm gonna be looking for is data that exists in the staging folder, right? Assuming that you're dealing with multiple files, then of course you create multiple folders, and then build your create tables off of that. We don't have that in this case. We only have one, which is called, what is it called? Farmers Market Data. So maybe I'll call it Farmers Market. Would be the name that I call it. Just kind of have some kind of name. So let me go ahead and, well, you know what? I don't need to delete this. If I do that, I don't need to do that. So let me leave that as is. I'm gonna create another folder. Let's call it Farmers Market, right? Yeah, Farmers Market. Again, everything could be set as default for now. There's things that you could do. We're not going to go into the other. You want to encrypt your files and all of that kind of stuff. Again, that's for another video. For right now, we're just kind of going through the basic setups. Since everything kind of isolated for access only within the AWS environment, then it's not an issue in this case. But of course, when it's open to the public and other user, that's where it makes sense to add some different levels of security and stuff like that. So either way, Farmers Market. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to drop the file that we have. So the same file that we have in Sharepoint, I'm going to drop it in here. Now the reason why I'm going to put it in here, I want to drop a file, a sample, better yet, file in here. I want to create my schema from that sample, and again, we're going to walk through the process on how we do that. So let's see. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. There it goes. Okay, so now that I have that loaded, so again, remember, connection first, database second. The next thing that I'm going to do is I need some tables created, but in order to create tables, I'm going to run a crawler. What the crawler does is going to scan the folder, and based on the file that are in that folder, it's going to determine what the schema should be for that data set. And I'll now show you how that looks. So we go to crawler. We're going to click add crawler. In this case, let me call it dev farmer market S3. Again, that's just a naming convention that I'm using. Farmer market S3, so it lets me know that it relates to an S3 bucket. This is a data set. So let me hit next. So in this case, it's going to be data store, not existing catalog. It doesn't exist yet, it's brand new. On top of that, when you look at the settings, you could do a run crawler in all folders, which means you have folder, subfolder. Let's scan everything. That would be a good example if you have a S3 bucket, and let's say you have like the way I do staging, and then you have farmers market, but inside that farmers market file folder, let's say you have year 2020, 2021, 2022, and then you have many files inside each of the years. That would be a good example where if you do crawl folders, it's going to scan all of those folders, right? All of the years of data that it has to kind of determine the schema that we're dealing with here. Or you could just specify one folder. But most of the time, this should be good enough, all folder, because I don't have other folders in there anyways. Only have that one, which is farmer market, which is where I'm going to be pointing to. But we'll walk through that. Let me make this a little bit bigger, just in case. I'm not sure if it looks small or not. Let me move it to the side. Okay, so S3 is going to be our source. Again, doesn't have to be S3. It could be, again, JDBC would be if we're trying to run a crawler on whether it be a Redshift environment or Postgres or SQL Server, whatever it is, right? Then it would be that. But in our case, it's going to be an S3 bucket. Connection, stay blank. We don't need to add a connection. That's fine. Leave it as is. Then this is where I got to specify my S3 bucket pass. Right? So one way to do it is go to your S3 bucket. And here's my pass right here. So I can just go ahead and copy this guy. If you're not sure what it is, just click on the folder and it'll kind of show you all of the buckets and you kind of find it that way. But since I already have it open, I just copy and paste and we're fine, right? So staging, farmers market, that's the pass. Let's see. For right now, we're going to leave all of this blank, but there's settings that you could put where it only scans maybe the top 10 files, whatever it is. You could exclude certain patterns. I mean, there's stuff you could add if needed. In our case, we're not going to do. It's going to be very clean, very straightforward, so there's no need to do nothing here. So it says add another data store. Nope, we're only doing one, so I'm going to select no. So another thing to keep in mind, I already have it set up on my setup, and I can make another video for this if there's something that, you know, y'all want me to show. But you gotta have a user profile that has access to AWS Glue services. So in this case, it would have access to S3 bucket, because it's going to access the S3 bucket to read the data, but it also needs access to AWS Glue. So those are the two services that it needs access to. I created a user already, which is why if I go to choose an existing row, I find one, the job analytics. That's what I created, which is what I use. This profile has all of those. It has been set to have access only to, I believe it's Redshift, Glue, Lambda, S3, like some of those key services, right? It doesn't have access to everything, but it has access to some of the key services that I need. Um, I need to run the job. When I do run it, it's gonna run under this row. So again, that's a different video, but keep in mind you gotta get that set up first as well. And then once you get it set up, if you don't got it set up, then just go to create a row, and then of course it takes you to the page. You can create one, get it set up. All right, let me hit next. This is gonna be run on demand. You could have it run where it runs more often. In my case, I'm running on demand. If you're dealing with files and you're gonna, you want to change, let's say that if your file's changing often, for example, like the schema's changing, they're adding new columns, things of that nature, then that's where you may want to have a process where this is running more frequently to be able to update that schema based on the new changes that were added, right? But in our case, it's a run on demand. Okay, so now that I do that, so now we're going to get to the database piece, right? So when you think, again, database is not like an actual database like Redshift or nothing like that. But ultimately what this is going to be that database that I created, that dev imlu db, right? So back over here under database, I created this database grouping, and ultimately in this database grouping here, is where so see how we have databases and then we have tables and connections. So ultimately all of the databases will have tables under it. Now the tables ultimately mean they're it's the schema of our data set, but it could be a data set that exists in S3. It could be a data set that exists in Redshift, Postgres database. It could be a combination of all of that, right? But it's all we're creating. Like you want to piece it all together to kind of have like this, think of it as a virtual, database subset. That's kind of where this comes in. So either way, you got to select your database. That kind of goes back to the step number 2, which create your database. And then now if you don't have one, you could add database. I don't need to add one because I already created one in advance. Everything else could stay blank. That's fine. Next. That's it. Hit finish. So I would say these filterings, they kind of suck, man. They really do. I'm not a fan of it. What did I call it? Dev. Was it farmer? Yeah, farmers market S3. Oh, never mind. It did work. Man, I swear I have had issues with it before. Okay, either way, that worked fine. So once the crawler is created, we're going to, let me just, before we go there, let me open up the tables. Again, I have other tables for some other stuff, but that's fine. Let me remove this database. And I'm going to add dev imlu db. Oops, maybe I spelled it wrong. That's why. Database dev imlu db. Nope, still nothing. All right, either way. We'll get back to this, but right now we don't have nothing, right? So if I were to search, do dev imlu db, I can't. It doesn't find nothing, right? Because we don't have any tables created. If I go back to my crawler, where is it? Here it goes. This crawler here, I'm gonna just click on it. I'm gonna run the crawler. Right. So now the crawler is running. It's gonna take maybe about a minute or two, probably like 2 minutes. So ultimately what the crawler is doing, it's spinning up Think of it as spinning up a virtual machine, a small instance of the virtual machine. Just like a server, right? Spinning up. So that's why I think it takes like 2 minutes sometimes for this process to run. But it's spinning up. As it spins up, then the process is running to read the data in our S3 folder, right, that we have over here. As it reads the data, it's pretty much analyzing all of the rows to kind of determine what the schema should be, right? The data types. Is it a string? Is it an integer? That kind of stuff. And then it'll create that for us. Let's see. If possible, can you also show each time data is uploaded to S3 bucket? A trigger would run glue job and the Redshift is also updated. If possible, can you also show each time data is uploaded to S3 bucket? So are you saying, so the what would, I'm trying to think, the process that will move data over to your S3 bucket, since in this flow, that this pipeline that we're dealing with, we're starting off by getting data from Sharepoint, right? So we pull data from Sharepoint, and then we take that data, and then we upload it to an S3 bucket. So by default, when that job runs, right, the visual Crohn's job, when that job runs, it's going to take the files, upload it to S3 bucket. As it uploads it to S3 bucket, there will be a step 3. Step 3 would be to run an AWS glue job. Now, we haven't got to that step yet to create the job, but ultimately we'll be able to run that job. By after we create it, we'll be able to call that job to run. So it's not automatically triggered from a sense of, if there's a new file in there, start the job. I think I'm not sure there's a way to do that. There may be a way. You know what? There may be a way, and I think it would be under triggers. I think I did it once, only to be honest with you. But I think what you're saying is, let me just kind of take a look at it real quick. So you got schedule, job event. Job event is saying, let's see. Okay, well, this is what jobs to run. That's not it. On demand doesn't matter, and then schedule. Yeah, I don't know if it would trigger that way, right? At least not from, I don't know if that's what you mean either, though, right? Maybe I misunderstood. But if you're talking about if a new file get dropped into an S3 bucket, then you want automatically the job to start to ETL, right, to your CSV files. But that's not needed, though, if that's the case, because from a workflow, it will be step 1, download file from Sharepoint. Step 2, upload the files to an S3 bucket. Step 3 would be take those files from an S3 bucket and then extract it, and then of course load to Redshift. It could be some sort of staging table in Redshift or something, right? But just load it to Redshift environment, and then from there, depending on your process, if you're doing some other stuff, some other, like, let's say we got to run a procedure to clean up the data or do some other stuff, then of course that will be like another step. Okay, so yeah, so if there's a way to do it through Lambda, I have not, and that's, I'm trying to think. I have done something similar once. It was a while back, but again, I really haven't had a true need to do it. But it probably was Lambda that where I saw that functionality. So once we go through the process and put everything together, we could look at those options as well. Um, Again, it's one of those things where I think there's gonna be a few ways to do it. That's probably one way, but there's other ways too, and then we kind of see which one makes sense, I guess, or which one you want to utilize going forward. So let's look at our glue. Is it done? Did it even start? Um, Farmer Market S3. Oops, damn it. Farmer Market S3. Oh, it's stopping there. So it's still running, not even done yet. Okay, that's why. Again, it takes a couple of minutes to run, but ultimately, once this finishes, we'll see. Where would it be at? Under tables. Here's my tables. We'll see it show up over here. There it goes. Boom, it's done, right? Again, how long did it take? It took over 2 minutes. So, which is normal. It does take a few minutes. So now that that's done, let me try to find it in my tables. Under let me look under database. See if I could find anything under database. Dev I am blue DB. I don't know why I'm bringing up everything else, but there it goes right here. See how we see the farmer's market? So let me go ahead and click on it under tables. So ultimately, we'll see who it did not. What happened here? So let's take a look at the file real quick. Probably should have looked at the file first. So normally what probably happen here, this happens every once in a while, and it's kind of odd on why that happens, but let's see. So the header does start on row 1, so that's not the problem. That's actually fine. That's one of the things I was trying to see is about the row, the starting row. So see how we have all of these properties here for the table? And so here's one of the things, even though the crawler is supposed to help identify all of that, it doesn't always do so either, right? And that's that could be a problem. So let me click on the crawler. Edit. Nope. Alright, so I'm gonna go back to crawler. Nope. Yeah, it's not going to be here. So let me go back to my table. So under not schema, but so what's supposed to happen here when it's and again, this has happened to me before. It doesn't happen often though, but it has happened to me for whatever reason. Sometimes it's not able to determine the starting point of the header. So what it does, it actually thinks that it doesn't have a header. Because it thinks it doesn't have a header to begin with, That's why our header names is this 0, right, all the way to whatever, because it thinks that the actual header is part of the data set. Now there is a table property that we could set for that. For example, let me go to one of these other ones that I have dealt with before. So see, no, that's not it. That's a bad example. No, this is it. So see where how we have this parameter here, the skip header dot line dot count 1. So this is key because this is pretty much, it's telling it, hey, the first row is the header. When we ran the crawler, because it wasn't able to identify the first row with the header, and I just saw in the settings, I don't think I saw anything either, and in the crawler where you could specify that. But let me go back and check to make sure. It may be our classifier that we would have to set. That's my guess anyways. The way I fixed it last time that I had this issue, I'm trying to think, how did I fix this issue last time? No, you don't need to create. Well, so here's the thing. When it comes to tables, you could create a table manually. Like that's a possibility. It doesn't make sense to do it though. The reason why I say that is that's the whole purpose of the crawler. The crawler is supposed to identify all of your columns, identify your data type of all the columns, and automatically create that for you. Now, it did do that, right? It did it to some degree. Let's see if I can find it. And the UI, one thing I don't know if it's because I'm zoomed in as well. I think it is because I was zoomed in all the way. There it goes. Okay, so if I go to edit, oh, that's not what I wanted. Damn it. What I wanted to go was table. If we go to the table, and then I'll find that table that we just created, which is farmers market. Their search here sucks, man, to be honest with you. I'm not a big fan of it, but either way, if we go here, in theory, everything that we see here, all of our columns, well, no, I don't, yeah, everything's string because of the header. So that's not going to fix that piece. But nevertheless, though, we have a total of what, 79 columns. If I look at the CSV file, we have 79 columns. So I mean, it all matches properly, right, to what we have. My bad, is it 79 or 80? We have 1 through 80, so we have 80 columns. Oh, there it goes. Yep, it is 80. So we have 80 columns total. One of them is, yeah, never mind. So the amount of columns is valid. What I don't want to do is, I mean, the workaround would be, okay, we'll go add a name to all of these. You could do that. That's not ideal. I'm hoping we don't have to do that in this case. But let me go to edit properties. Nope, my bad, not property, edit table. So under edit table, what was the name of it? Let me go back. So let me open up tables in a new window. Now I'm going to look at one of my previous tables that I have that I know it is set up properly that had that skip. So if I go to edit table, there it goes. Under table properties here, right, we have key. So I'm going all the way down toward the bottom. This would be skip dot header dot line dot count. Again, what sucks is it doesn't always do this, man. It only does it when it just the crawler is not able to identify. Um, it's not able to identify. So let's see. My only thing about this is, I'm trying to think. It would be nice if they had that the option to specify like your in your crawler, because it doesn't give you that option, right? It's kind of more like automatic, like just specify the folder, let the crawler do its thing, and I'm just trying to make sure that there is not a section that maybe I missed. Um, let's see, table value must be positive integer that includes the table location, blah blah blah. Nope, this is not it. So there is no there is no way to specify in this case like the starting point, right? Like what is the header? Um So here's the thing: if we were to run it right now today, the way it is, what would actually happen is it would actually work properly. The only downfall is, see how we have these generic column names? They don't really tell us what they are. Like, they're just all generic. Um, where one way to do it, of course, it just, to me, I'm not a fan of doing it this way, but one way would be to edit the schema, right? As you edit the schema, you could, give it the right name, right? So just kind of looking at the Excel sheet, it would be FM ID. And then, of course, column 2 is market name, and, so on and so on. Doing it this way is not hard from a sense if you're dealing with maybe 4 or 5, I don't know, maybe let's say 10, 15 columns, but we have like 80 columns in this case, right? So that's the only downfall. You would have to do that for each one, go one by one. And the reason why this even happened is the crawler was able to scan the whole file. It just wasn't able to determine that the first row is actually the header. I don't know if it did that for, like, I'm just looking at the file right now. It could be the file as well. So let's look at the file. If I go to the far right, see how we have update time? We have two columns for time. We have one for date, then time, but time is blank for the header name. Then we have a course header updated time. So they're like two separate columns, but in reality, these seem like they probably should have been one column, but they're not. Right? They've been split out into two different columns. One thing that we could probably try and rerun it again, see if this works, is just give this, give it a name, right? We call it update time 2, right? Because I mean they kind of go together. Besides that, I don't think we have any values. So we're missing leading zeros, but all of that could get fixed in the database. That's not an issue. So let me just make that change, and then let me save it. So this is what I would try first before we try to manually doing what I just did over here. If we do this, that fixes it, and that's actually fine. But I want to try to avoid that if possible. So let me go ahead and upload this file again. Oops. Let's upload it. Only thing I did was I added that additional column that was missing. That could have been what was throwing it off the crawler as well. Again, we'll see if that's the case. So let me go back to the crawler. And now let me find, there it goes, right here. And I'm gonna run the crawler again. Okay, so now it's running. I just have to give it crawler is now running. Again, it should take about 2 minutes or so, but I'm hoping if it reads it properly, what should happen is when I go back to my table, we're gonna see the proper name identified, then of course a more defined data type as well. A lot of the times, like through my experience, I'm actually working on a project right now. I'm working with another company on this project with Azure Synapse, and we're using their blob storage. It's pretty much there's a process where they're extracting Redshift data that they have in Redshift, and they're exporting that out as a Parquet file to Azure. There's the storage, kind of like their S3 version, which is like storage blob, and we had some issues there too on some of the processes on their pipelines to kind of identify the files. It just identified everything as text. So what happens is that you load everything to the we didn't load it to we're using a serverless SQL database, but so pretty much what that means is the files that are being exported out of Redshift as a Parquet file, they're being dropped into a SQL storage blob, and then we have Synapse that lives on top of that, which is able to query the files. But all of those files, of course, from a query standpoint, are all text. They're considered text files. There's some nice things about that, but there's some challenges and some downfalls. Like you could write SQL statements, but SQL functionality is limited as well on certain features that you could do. There's some stuff you could do just like the way you do in any normal SQL database, but there are other stuff that it's not that straightforward, right? It's not as normal. So it's always interesting, playing around with these other environments. You kind of see the good and the bad, and try to see which fits, I guess, on your needs, right? On your business case, your use case. So let's see, how long has it been running? Okay, so it's already stopping. Should be done any second now. And once it's done, we'll take a look at the table, and hopefully the table should be good. Still running. Yep. Because let me just. And this time is again this. Even though it said 57 seconds, right? You could tell as I refresh, I come back and take a look at it. It's still at 57 seconds. Oh, there it goes. It's ready. Okay, it's done. All right, cool. All right, and of course it gave you the log here, one table update. So now let's go back to my tables. Let's see if this updated it properly. Boom, there we go. See how we have a column name now? And see how we actually have more proper data types? So that worked. This was one of those scenarios where just the header was missing an actual header name, and I think that threw off the process to identify to identify it properly. But as you can see, we have all of our header names, right? And of course time. Yep. So everything looks good overall. Now, there's some things that you may notice that maybe it didn't identify properly. So, for example, you could always go back and if we take a look at the file real quick, for the most part, everything should be probably text. This is, what is that set as? Yep, so that should be fine. The only thing that I noticed that it did not set properly, and again, this is more likely because of, it's just reading the data and time, right? This is date, time. If we take a look at it, it actually has it as string, but that's not a big issue because if that's needs to be utilized, you could always convert it in Redshift. So either way, we're fine now, right? We have our table schema. It looks fine based on the raw data. So now that we have that, we can move on to the next step. The next step is going to be, so again, remember step 1, connection. Step 2, create database. Step 3, create crawler, which in this case will be a crawler for your S3 bucket. And then of course, step 4 is running the crawler to ultimately generate your table, which is, here's our table and our schema for that table. Now that we have that done, the next step is going to be we're going to create a job. So I'm going to use the legacy screen. They have this new jobs. It does look different. I use it a little bit. I'm just used to the legacy format, so I'm going to stick to legacy for now. But you could explore they're pretty much the same thing. It looks different. It has a different look to it. But let's go to jobs. I'm going to call this dev IamLou. You know what? Let me give it a proper name. It will be dev farmer market S3 to Redshift. And then we have our row. Again, you got to have a row in order to run all of these services. In this case, I have one already set up. So one important thing to keep in mind is go down to where is it? Security configuration. Okay, under security configuration, you're gonna have, let me make it a little bit bigger. You're gonna have a work type section, right, in your drop down. All right, so this is key because what happens is most likely you would just create a job, set the default, right? I mean, most likely if you're not sure what you're kind of new and you're getting started, you may not know what to even change here because it's optional. You just may skip on over and go on. In order to save you some money, because it does add up over time, especially if you're running it often, it's going to be your worker type. So unless you're running memory intensive jobs, like jobs that are going to be very intense, there's no need to run any of these. I will stick with standard. And then you can determine the number of workers. Number of workers in this case starts from 2 and then goes up to I don't know, what is it, 299, I guess, or 149. Yeah, it just depends. But it goes up. The number goes up. I will stick with 2. So what this means is we're starting with a basic worker type, which means we're just gonna what that means is, think of it as it's gonna create a server, a basic server with very minimal CPU resources, and it's gonna use that to process your file and load to your database. I'm just looking at this file, and if I were to count what we're dealing with, we are dealing with 8,600 records. That's like nothing. I have processed files that are, hundreds of, not just hundred, but millions, even like 4 million or so, like rows. And even in those cases, my work time will be standard. My workload would probably be more like 4 or 6, and that's able to get processed in the matter of, I don't know, maybe like 2-3 minutes or so. So let's see. All right, so I'm going to set that as 2. Everything else should be fine. Hit next. Okay, so the next thing is we got to choose our data source. So this kind of goes back to the whole table, right? When we created a table and did all of that. So now I'm going to find my, what is it called? Farmers Market. There it goes. So this is a table that I'm going to be pretty much extracting data from. So that's why, again, it's kind of the whole purpose of create your crawler to extract the schema, to generate a schema for you for your file, and ultimately that will be your source table. And that's kind of what this is here, our data source, right, which ultimately points to the S3 bucket. So once we select the right one, click next. Change schema from your source and create a new target. I'm going to select yes. We are going to create a new target. So once I'm in here, so there you have 2 options here. You could either create a Redshift schema already by default, and if you create one, so kind of give an example, that ultimately what that means is you gotta, in your Redshift environment, if you happen to have a table already created, like let's say I'm going to call this table Farmers Market, just call it O1 for now. And then of course you would just manually create every column in here, right? Whatever there is. And they may, I don't know what this one was called. This could be ID. You add another column for, I don't know, what was it, like YouTube or whatever, right? You could do that if you already have something set up that way, or like create something, or maybe you already have a table you want to set it up. If that is the case, what would happen is, let me kind of go back. What you would need to do is create a crawler that connects to that table in Redshift, and then generate a table, right, as well. So, and when you get to your job, to create your job, you'll see that as your table under data targets. Like it will be, you will have to find it, but you'll find the name here for that table. In our case, with the way I could prefer to do this way, I would want this job to create the table for me automatically, so I don't have to do that. So that's where this create table in your data target comes in. I gotta create a table up front for my source, but for my target, my job would do it for me automatically. So there's no need for me to create any tables and all that. But again, if you have tables already created that you just need to map to it, then you do have to run a crawler off that table to ultimately create a table under your database and here in AWS Glue. And then that's under this section, you will find, your table, and then you will just do like a mapping, right? Map each column to the right field pretty much. But in our case, I'm going to have the database create, like the process create it for me automatically. So in this case, JDBC, that's fine. Our connection is going to be this So again, this kind of goes back to when you got to create a connection, right? This connection is going to be dev IamLou, which points to that Redshift instance and to a specific database, which in my case is called the dev database. Now down here under database, name of database, it doesn't tell you here, but what you would have to do here would be, it would be database / schema. Oh, hold on. What? Let me try to think. How under database? You know what? My bad. So database name would just be dev, but I'm not sure why it's asking for database name. Yeah, so you put dev, which is the name of your database in Redshift. I believe that's what it is. So see how it created the mapping for us automatically? So keep in mind what you see on the target side. When this job runs, it's going to create a table for us automatically called farmer's market. And these are going to be the fields that it's going to create in that table. If you want these fields to be renamed different, like maybe there's one specific called like XY, you don't want it to be called XY, you want it to be called something else. This is where you will come in. There you go, and change it, right? You would just change it to whatever you want it to be. But by default, it would just copy the schema names that we had already and map it that way. Once you review this and everything's good here, then we're going to go to save job and edit script. Okay, so now that we've done this, let me try to move this over some. These are kind of like some of the steps and process. Again, there's things. I'm not going to go too detail in it. What we're doing is kind of something straightforward, basic, high level. But of course, there's other stuff you could do, and this is where you could just kind of modify your SQL code to do that. In this case, under the new, see how this section points to certain pieces of your code. If you were to review this under the new job module, then some of these processes kind of more UI based. So instead of being like where you see the code in Python, it's kind of more UI based. Again, I haven't I messed with it a little bit, but not as much. So just kind of keep that in mind about that. But nevertheless, and here, for the most part, everything is good. The only thing I want you to keep in mind is if we go, let me try to make it a little bit bigger if possible, and hopefully my face is not covering it up. Let me move this up. Okay, there it goes. I think that's better. So if we take a look at the last where it says glue content right dynamic frame from JDBC, let me scroll right. One thing I want to keep in mind, see under this catalog connection. So this is fine. This is based on the connection that we created. Then we have connection options, right? And then you have DB table name. Here's the table name. And then, of course, our database, which is dev. So all of that's correct, right? So again, if I go back, I'm under the dev. There goes dev database already. So all of that found. Let me get rid of all of this. Discard. Now, but let's say that you're dealing with different schemas. Right now, I'm dealing with a public schema, right? By default, it's public. So let's say if I want to create a new, oops, damn it, that's not what I wanted to do. Discard. So let's say if I want to do a new schema, and my new schema, I'm going to call it staging, STG. Because maybe that's where I want all the data to flow into, right? I want everything to get imported to the staging schema. And then maybe from there, we migrate it over to a different schema, reporting schema, data warehouse schema, or something. So we have what's called staging schema. If you want to load data something different from what's default, your public schema, keep in mind that it's not going to do it for you automatically, but you have to come to your DB table in the bottom of connection options, And then you're going to type in here stg dot, right? This ultimately represents your schema. So again, if whatever the schema name is that you're dealing with and you want it to get loaded to that schema, make sure to make those changes in that section. Everything else has already been defined when we went through the whole mapping. When we created the job, we were able to take the source. Again, if you want to review the Python code, just take a look at it. It's pretty straightforward, not too hard to kind of understand. So, I mean, we have all of our database. Here's our table name. It's, you will see the mapping of how everything maps, right? This field to this field, which in our case happens to be the same name. So it works out fine. Data types, all of that. So once we have all of this set up, I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And now I could actually run. I'm just going to go ahead and run it from here, like ad hoc run it, right? So let me go ahead and run. And just run. All right, cool. So now that it's running, and it's not a big file, but because it needs to, again, same thing, it needs to spin up an instance in order to kind of to do what it needs to do. That takes at least a minute or so. Then of course after that, it's whatever time it takes to process the file. This is a small file. This file will probably take a matter of just a few seconds to process. But what takes the longest is the spinning up the instance in order to do this job, right? That's pretty much, think of it as little small VM containers that are being spin up automatically, and then ultimately it does what it needs to do, and then of course they shut off once you're done. That's why it matters, going back to the configuration on selecting your worker type. If you're dealing with small, I would always start small and test it out, and then from there you could adjust. So if you're dealing with a file that's, let's say, 10 million rows, start off small, test it out, run it, and see how long it takes. If it takes, I don't know, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and you're okay, like in your mind, that's fine. I could deal with 3-4 minutes. Then the cost of that will be very minimal. If that's not fast enough for you, let's see what happened here. Staging.farmer market does not exist. Okay, which is fine. We know it doesn't exist, but it's still running. So what should happen is it should create this table for us. It did a check that it doesn't exist, so it should create it. Let me check to see if it did create it. Let me refresh. Boom, there it goes, farmer market. So we see a table now. So let's kind of go back though. There it goes. So it's done. The logs are beneficial to some degree. I mean, you could tell all it says did not exist. But it's not like it said after that, hey, that's created or whatever. It doesn't tell you that kind of information, I guess. But it does come in handy when you got errors. Kind of helps out a little bit, right? You got to understand how to read the error. Either way, table has been created, farmer market under staging. And then when I click on it, we should see data. Are we going to see data or no? Yep, there you go. There's our data. All right, so now just kind of review everything. Now that we have a job that is connected to an S3 bucket schema that we generated, the table, and then of course we have Redshift instance, and where it's going to load data to that Redshift instance. Now we can start finally piece our steps together. So for that, what I'm going to do is, now let me connect back to let's see. All right, there it goes. So I'm going to remote into my server where we have the Visual Cron's job. There we go. This service over here. Yep, there we go. They had it right here. So see how we have first step is download files for SharePoint. That's still the same. I'm still pointing to the same folder. We'll run through that process. Second process is upload files to S3. In this case, it will be slightly different because we're dealing with a different file name. Again, still kind of going back. Let's say if we're dealing with farmer market data. So I'm going to say farmer market. Then I'm going to make the changes of, instead of looking for the word sales, I'm going to look for the word, what is it? Farmer market. So that's what I'm looking for, right? So this would be the scenario where if we happen to have other files that get dropped into that section. I know it's kind of small, so it may be kind of hard to see, but can't really make that bigger. All right, so I need to see what my bucket name is over here. So let me go to where's my bucket, staging, farmer market. So I need this. So up here where it says staging sales, it's going to be staging farmer market. Let's see, Visual Chrome, if I schedule a job for 9 p.m. and shut down my computer, will the job still run at 9 p.m.? So Visual Chrome's is one, it's a server, it's an application that I would recommend to have on a machine that just always going to be running, right? Like some sort of cloud. Here's the thing, it could be locally, it doesn't have to be cloud based. You could have it somewhere like in your company, like on-prem, but I would have it at least at the minimum some kind of VM where it's installed on the VM, but on some kind of on a server, you know, in your network, or just have some physical PC that's on the side that's always running, and then just have it run on that machine. If you're gonna be running it on a PC, like your own workstation, right, at work kind of deal, then yes, you got to make sure to always keep your PC on. As long as your PC is on, then you're fine. Like I have mine, I just remoted into it, but ultimately for me, I have this running on an EC2 instance on AWS that's of course always running. So this never shuts down. So yeah, I guess short answer is your PC does have to stay on, because that's the only way it can run, right? If the PC's off, it cannot run the service. That kind of applies, you know, to anything that always is automated and running. It always has to stay on. So in this case, I'm going to specify in my S3 the farmers market folder that I created. So I'm going to hit OK. This guy here, this call, I don't need this, so I'm gonna just go ahead and delete it for now. But let me open up my job. I don't need this, so I'm gonna delete. Yep. So again, as we could see, our main steps is download SharePoint files, save it to local folder, upload it to an S3 bucket. The third step is going to be I want to run the job. The job that we just created, I want to be able to run it. So with the Visual Chrome, we can connect SAP. I'm not sure. I mean, unless there's an SAP connection, which they may be, I'm just not sure about that. There you go, the SAP. So this is able to connect a what is it, R3 job execution. So, I mean, I'm not as familiar, but it seems like it's able to run an SAP job. So I guess you would have to create the job in SAP first. And if whatever that job does in SAP, maybe it exports out data or something of that sort. But yeah, Visual Chrome does seem to have the ability to execute that job. So that's that's an option if that's what you're trying to do as well. It does have a lot of features that you could tell, man. We look at the ad from database to files. Let me see what else. XML data. What is it? Reporting crystal reports. So yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but I guess you could do that as well. Exchange. So you could, well, that wouldn't be for emails, but there's a section there goes messaging. This would be if you want to send an email. Like a good example would be, if the job runs, you could have an email get sent at the end of the job, like job successful. Well, if you don't ever get an email, then at least you know that, hey, something happened. Maybe the computer got shut off. Maybe if you're running this on a computer, let's say at your job, maybe the power went out, and because the power went out, my computer turned off or something, right? It would just kind of, there's things that you could kind of do as well, if you want to be more like have a log of everything. But again, it just depends on what you're trying to do. In our case, now that we have these guys, one of the other things that we want to do, but let's look at the documentation real quick. I'm gonna look at AWS command line interface, glue. We're gonna pretty much run a glue job, and it's very straightforward, right? So I just wanna, let's review the commands. So I'm looking at the commands here for glue related processes. And we take a look at the list. You could create connectors and connections and crawlers and database and all of that. Well, I don't want to create nothing, but what I do want to do here is I want to be able to run what we created, which would be under start run job run. So let me go ahead and click on this guy. If we click on this, it says start a job run using the job definition. So ultimately here it's literally is job name, that we provide the job name. You provide the ID. I like providing the job name because it makes it easier to see. And this is literally all we got to do for this guy. Let me see if they have an example. Just kind of show you. There it goes. So it's AWS glue start job run. Then literally will be the job name. That's how simple it is. So it's pretty straightforward, right? So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and then I'm going to go back. So this would be our step 3. And for that, what I'm going to do, just to make it easier, I'm going to copy this task that I have here. I'm going to clone it. And then I'm going to change the name. I'm going to call this run AWS glue job farmer market. It will be S3 to Redshift, right? And then I'm going to go to my execute. This is the same, like I'm still need to execute the Amazon command line interface. Now this is going to be different. Like all of this that I have, I'm going to erase all of that. Now what's different is I don't need to specify AWS, but I do need to specify glue because that's the service that I'm going to be running a job for. So it'll be service, start job, then it'll be, let me see, I believe it's job name. That's what it is. Let me just copy this. So it would be job name space, and then I'm going to specify my job name. So now let's go back to AWS and let's get the job name, right? So where my job's at. Here it goes. Is this it? Yep. So I call this dev farmer market S3 to Redshift. This is the name of my job. So I'm going to take that. The reason why job names works in this case because the job name has to be unique anyways. So it just kind of works. Let's see. If there are 3 developers working, each of them need to buy visual Chromes. No, they don't have to. like for I'm using visual crones, and I'm not the only one that uses it. I have somebody on my team that uses it as well. Like they create jobs and make updates or whatever. Um, the way it works is it does have a web interface. So I don't have it set up, but it does have that capability where if you install visual crones, let's say on a server, right? Install it on a server. It gives you whatever the server IP address is or the URL, and then of course there's a specific port number. And then by connecting to that port number, it'll actually give you a web version of Visual Chrome, so you could access it from the web. So that's number one. Now number two would be if you have Visual Chrome installed, let's say on a remote server. Well, if that developer has access to that remote server to like log in, then they could run Visual Chrome as well under their login. So I have a developer as well, part of my team. So the remote server that I'm logged into right now, they have credentials for that server as well, and they log in and do work and do stuff that they need to do. So anytime they need to create a job or edit a job or do whatever, they just log in, and then they could just again run the application under their login. So now the thing with the application though, it's on a per server basis, right? Or PC/server basis. One instance you install it on a server or on a PC. In order for you to anybody to access it, you either have to have access to that PC or that server to log in, and then you could have access to Visual Chrome's a mini user doesn't need it, so it doesn't matter. Or you could set up the browser version. Like there's a browser ability to set up where if you go through that process of configuring that. Again, I don't have mine set up. I'm assuming it's pretty straightforward, but I'm not 100% sure. But there is an option to pretty much you're opening up a port on your remote PC, and you got to install that web service as well. But what it does is it gives the end user again a browser version of Visual Chrome. And then, of course, you could modify, create jobs, kind of like the way I'm doing now, but through the browser. Again, I have not done that on at least not on my machine because I really haven't had a need to it. But there's an option to do that as well. Okay, so now that we have 3 steps in our job, right? Download files, upload to S3 bucket, and then also run the job. Now here's the thing though, when you run the job to the command line, if you're not doing anything else after that, then you're good. You could run this and you're fine. If there are going to be more steps after this, after you run your glue job, the one thing that I will keep in mind is you need to add another task that's going to be for kind of like think of it like a sleep, like in Python. And the reason why you have to do that is when you run this command. So we saw in the browser when we ran this job, it took like 2 minutes, right? It takes about a minute to spin up the instance, and then ultimately a few seconds to run the job, like the actual job. So it takes almost 2 minutes. Well, if I run this right now, it's going to show in Visual Chrome that it's done like in 3-4 seconds. But we know it doesn't, it takes longer than that. Because Visual Chrome's, in this case, all it's doing, it's sending the command over. And because it's sending the command over, like, hey, start the job, and the job got started successfully, that's it. It doesn't wait until it's completed. It just sees it more like, hey, the job started. So I'm done here, right? Like I'm done. I could move on to the next step. Well, if the next step is based off something that relates to this, like a good example would be if the next step 4 was, okay, once the data is loaded to the database, we want to run a procedure that takes that data from staging and moves it to another schema or something like that. If you're doing something like that, then you would have to put like a sleep timer here. And that's kind of, where is that under? I used it before. It would be under Where is it? I think it's called wait. Now that I think about it, I think the proper name of it is called wait. Maybe it's under systems. Nope. Maybe it's under process. Nope. Services, maybe? Nope, not services. I don't see a wait here. There it goes. Enter this guy here. So it would be a wait. Then ultimately just specify how long you wanted to wait, right? If you want the job to kind of wait, like let's say 5 minutes, then you put 5, right? Or 2 minutes, you put 2 or whatever. So just kind of keep that in mind. Just something more. That's one of the little nuances of when this runs. All this is doing is waiting to get a response back that said, "Hey, job started successfully." But if the job takes 2 minutes to run, but it takes only 10 seconds to tell you that it started successfully, well, now it's going to go to the next step. And in the next step, again, you're running a procedure that relates to that data. Well, there's not going to be no data there because it's not done yet, right? The only other thing that I'm going to do here next is going to be once we load this, you don't. So what I'm about to do next, you don't have to do. Oh, you know what? I'm not going to do it now, but just something to keep in mind. If you're dealing with like one file that's being modified over and over again, what we have right now should work. Like it should work like a charm. And I guess we could test it out real quick, right, to make sure that it works. If you're gonna be dealing with different files, newer files, like new files, and maybe have like time stamps at the end of the file and so on, that's where what I would recommend is to have another folder, like just like the way we have one for staging, have another one for like complete or process or something, right? Ultimately, what that would mean is once the job is done doing what it's doing, it would move that file, like the files that relate to, let's say, farmer's market, and it's going to move it over to that complete folder. And then ultimately this folder will be empty for the new file that come in. It just depends on what you're dealing with, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. If you are dealing with like new files all the time, like I've created some services where we're downloading files from FTP sites, but we're only downloading the newer file. So as we download the newer file, we drop that into an S3 bucket, and then once we finish processing it, I move that file over to like an archive folder for record keeping. And then of course the staging folder will stay blank, empty, until the job runs again and drops a new folder. So I would be dealing with the same file, but new records each month. Okay. So if you're dealing with same file records each month, then I think one option would be, let me go to this new job process, and I'm going to find the one that we just created. This guy. See how I have dev, farmer's market. Scheduler runs. Okay. So nope, I think we're fine. So one of the things that you could do then would be, let me kind of go back then to my let me hit OK for now. So one of the things that we could do that could be done here as a step is to, if you're dealing with one file only, and let's say that file you're going to keep growing and growing every week, every day, every month, then what could be done is you do a truncate. As you load new data into your data set, you would truncate the table first, and then ultimately what that means is it's going to load all of the data in the file. So, which means they're going to capture new records and, of course, the old records as well. But you're going to load everything to the database again. In order to do that, you would just have to, in this case, Let me see if I have a connection already or not. I'm not sure if I do, but let me check. If I don't, let me create one real quick. This is a connection in Visual Crohn's. I know I have connection to the Redshift environment. I just want to make sure, which I don't think I do, but I wanted to see if I have a connection to the dev environment, which is what I'm using now. So let me see. Okay, yep. Let me go ahead and copy this. Clone. Its database is called dev. And then I'm going to call this dev data warehouse. All right, cool. So now that I created a connection, so now what I could do then, if I go down to my job again, right, I'm going to create a under task before I run this job here. So I'm going to add a new job, and I'm going to go to SQL, database SQL. I'm going to call this truncate table farmer market. So literally just going to do a truncate. If I go to my SQL, I'm going to go to connections, and I'm going to select my, where is it, dev data warehouse, which is what I'm dealing with here. And then of course I'm just going to run literally a trunk, oops. Damn, it keeps spelling it wrong. Truncate table dev let me see, the farmers with the S, or let me just copy the name. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to move this step to step 3. So now the step is download files, upload to S3, truncate the table, right, that we're going to reload again, and then of course run the job, the S3, the Redshift job, because now it's going to be empty and it's able to reload the file again. So if I hit OK, and let's go ahead and run this. Let's make sure everything works well. So let's hit run. So let's see, it should be downloading the file, and it should tell us here on the output what the file name is. There we go. So that downloaded properly. So this seemed to work fine. Oh, my truncate, what happened here? Why did this not work? Let's take a look. Schema dev does not exist. You know what? Hold on, let me see. No, you know what? This is right. It doesn't exist. It's not dev, it's staging. What the hell? I got it wrong. So the schema, the database is dev. The schema is called staging, STG. That's why. All right, let's run it again. Okay, so far, nope. So now everything ran, everything's done. So see how the job, everything's been done? But in reality, this guy here, let me order it properly. But this last step, it shows complete, successful, because it started the job and then it got a message knowing that, hey, the job had been started successfully. So from this aspect, see that it's done. But it's technically not done, right? Because if I were to take a look at it under my monitor, I'm going to see that it's running right now. Oh, is it still running? Maybe it is done. I don't think it's done. What time is this? No, this is from earlier, so it should be running. Let me wait. It takes a minute sometimes. There it goes right there. Boom, it's running. Yeah, you're right. Dev is the database. I had it wrong. But once I change the schema, we're fine. So from a monitoring standpoint, also keep just kind of FYI, if you do go under the new, under AWS Glue, under the jobs, but the new module, not the old one, but the new one, it does show you like a monitor, and it kind of tells you what's running. It tells you how long it takes it to run. And this is where I would start off with a small worker type, small resource, right? Their capacity, start off small, and then test it out, see how long it takes. In our case, it should take probably no more than 2 minutes. And that's because we're using the bare minimum resources, which is the equivalent of maybe like, I don't know, a cent or two per job or something like that. It's a small amount, right? Every time you run the job, because that's how you get charged. If I were to be using a like the other work type that it had, which was the like a higher resource, the one that's set by default, every time I run the job once, I'll probably cost me $1 or $2 per job that it runs. Even though it's going to take about the same amount of time, but because of it's spinning up more resources to run the process, and it's not worth it, man. Like paying maybe 2 cents for one job run compared to $2 for a job, or $1, I guess, or what, maybe like 75 cents or 90 cents, but something like that, right? It's a big difference. So just keep that in mind, man. You'll save a lot of money. And like I noticed in the very beginning, like it's some time back when I started running this for one of my clients that we were processing data, we had it configured wrong, and we're running the job like 20 different processes every 4 times a day, maybe more. And we noticed it starting to get a little pricey. It was, we were spending a good, what was it, 20-30 bucks a day. Once I made the changes, dude, it went down for like literally $1, maybe $2 a day. Like big difference. So just kind of FYI on that. So the truncate table, so I think this is done now. Yeah, there it goes, done. See how long, this only took a minute to run. So the truncate is pretty much a SQL statement that would delete data. So the difference of truncate and delete, they're the same from the end result, like the data's gone. The difference is when you're dealing with truncate statements, it bypasses the database transaction logs when you're dealing with transactional databases, and because it pretty much skips that, you don't need to keep a record of that data, like from a transaction log standpoint. And then also some of the benefits is when you're dealing with, it's like identity columns, right? Like sequence ID columns from a database, it resets those columns as well. So like whenever you have a table, let's say you create some kind of identity column where it's just like every time you create a new record, a sequence up 2, 3, 4, etc. That's your ID. If you do a truncate on a table, it actually resets that column back to 1. So when you reload data again, it'll be 1, 2, 3, like in sequence. When you do a delete, what happens is it deletes the data and it logs every line that you're deleting to the transaction log table. And the reason why it does that is because if you ever want to do a backup of what got deleted or restore what was deleted or things of that nature, roll back, it has that stored in transaction. You could bring it back. In our case, because that really doesn't matter, because you have the source already, which is the file, is want that to be loaded. There's no need to do that. Which is why it's faster as well, just to do a truncate. If you do a delete, good example would be if you were to do a delete on a 10 million row table, that delete process would actually take some time. Like it may take a minute, 3 minutes. I mean, something, right? It depends on how much resource you have on that database, but it's going to take probably a few minutes to actually delete that statement. And the reason why it takes that long is because of it has to load all of that data to the transaction log, and then it's able to delete from the table. So, and a truncate skips the transaction log. It just says, "Oh, we're going to delete it, restart identity, we're good to go," and it does it right away. Let's see. Are you going to live stream more? Are we done for the day? Just wanted a quick revision how to connect SharePoint S3. What time is it? 10:17. So I'm probably going to be on for another 20 minutes. So we could kind of go through that real quick. So what do you want to... So just kind of real quick, we go back to the database. If I hit refresh, we have data here. So ultimately that got the job done, right? Just so we see that everything's still intact. Data flow through, data there, data got refreshed, everything works fine. So kind of going back to your question, just want a quick revision on how to connect SharePoint S3. Okay, we could do that. Yeah, let's do that. And Visual Chrome is the one-time payment software. So I bought Visual Chrome's. When did I buy it? I bought it. I want to say 10 months ago, maybe. I used another software before. I have used a few softwares. There's like, either way, I have tried a few, and eventually I just needed something a little bit better. Eventually I came across this. I bought this. I swear, I want to say I paid like $1,600 for it, and it was like a one-time payment. But the last time that we came here, man, I swear I saw their payment, like their costing, and it looked like it was different. Like I saw they actually had like a monthly, I don't know if it's a subscription based or what exactly, but it was like a monthly payment plan or something, and they did not have that whenever I bought it a while back. I'm trying to see where is it at. Maybe it's under orders. Choosing the right license. Again, I'm using the pro version in my case. Basic version, for what you're trying to do, you will need the pro version. So just kind of keep that in mind. Because it doesn't have a lot of the features that we use today do not exist in the basic version, only the pro version. So let's see. How does renewal work for information on the subscription, maintenance, and support plan? See, they didn't have subscription before. That's what I'm saying. It's kind of odd because now they do. They did not have that before. So let's see. The service, a 1 year subscription. So whenever I bought it, it was, I think, $1,600 for a year worth of maintenance. But after that year, you still keep the software. You just don't get updates unless you want updates, and you gotta pay like another year subscription of updates. But ultimately, you keep the software. You continue to use it after the fact. I don't know if that's what this means. The 1 year subscription. We are specialized. Let's see. Within the scope of our, no, that's not it. Free upgrades. You will receive all maintenance releases or updates or upgrades for the duration of maintenance period. Okay, which is what I have. Maintenance period, which may or may not include additional features, updates, and maintenance release covered. Blah blah blah. Upgrades to the next major version are also included, which makes sense. Renewing the maintenance. If you have Visual Chrome license but no maintenance license, you can't purchase the maintenance license separately, which that makes sense. Renewing. Okay. So this still doesn't show the pricing though. Let's see. As of in February 14th, 2022, Visual Crohn's moved from. Oh, that's why. So there you go. They actually have their new model. It used to be, and this happened earlier this year. It used to be you buy the software, you get free maintenance for a year, and then if you want additional maintenance, you gotta pay the maintenance upgrade later. But they switched this year. It showed that here February 14th to a subscription license model now. License purchases before this date remain with limitations described below. Using cloud access features, mobile apps, cloud servers functionality require active maintenance subscriptions with the new service license, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's what it is. They did change the way they charge. Again, when let's see how much it is though. That's what I'm kind of curious now. Well, how much are these guys charging now? That would be under maybe under cart, I guess. Let's go to cart. So they have a one subscription server license pro. No item selected. So let's say add item. So it's $2,900. Why is it so much? Let me make sure that's the right license. One server license. Oh, my bad. That's not right. The one that I had was, well, that's maintenance. 1 year maintenance for server license. Damn, it looks like they must have upped their price, because that's not what I paid, that's for sure. I want to say I paid like $1,600, and now they're charging almost $3,000 per year. And I think now the way they're doing it is subscription based, which means if you're paying, you would have to pay $3,000 every year going forward to continue to use it. Again, overall, it's not a bad price. I've seen other software way more expensive than this. For what it does, I think it's worth it. But again, it is more than what it used to be. Because, man, I did not pay that much. I paid like $1,600. And it was like a one-time payment. You pay once, you get maintenance upgrades for a year. And then after that year, you still keep the software. You don't have to keep paying $16 every year after that, unless you want new updates. And again, for me, it's been like 10 months since I bought it, so I haven't even hit the 1 year mark yet, and I already upgraded once from one version to another version. So the free tier trial for 45 days, the pro version, I need to provide the software works, then only my team will buy. Yeah, no, for sure. They should have a trial version. Where is it? Maybe under downloads. And free download with full version, which is what you want. It is the free version, like the trial version is the pro version. So yeah, keep that in mind. It is the pro version. Because I actually tried it out too. I downloaded their free trial first to test it out and make sure that it did what I wanted to do, and then after that I bought the software. So do that. Download it, install it. You can play around with it. And then, again, everything that we did today, it'll be on my video as well, on one of my live streams videos. So you could always go back and take a look if you want, to see how we did certain things to kind of, mimic what we did. I know one of the things that you asked for, and we can kind of show you real quick before I log off, is about the connection to Sharepoint. I believe that's what you mentioned. Right, so let me kind of show you that real quick. If I go to task, and that's going to be this guy here. Where is it at? download files. So see how I have this connection here, and I'm connecting to my SharePoint site. So the way it works in Visual Crohn's, and it does this so you could like reuse it over and over again. You have to go to connections. And I'm just going to show you real quick. I don't think it's going to show nothing. But when you go to connections, you're going to go to add. So let's say you want to add a new connection. The connection could be FTP. It could be email. It could be SQL, like database. But in our case, there's the one for SharePoint. So when I click on SharePoint, you're going to give it whatever name you want to call it, right? This is going to be a name that you could identify with it. So I'm going to call it I am Blue. Again, just give it whatever name you want. That's easy for you to know. Yep, it's SharePoint, so that's fine. So next we're gonna go to connection settings, and here you have in your drop down you got two options. You have SharePoint Online. I'm assuming that's what you're dealing with, or you have SharePoint, like 2016, 2013. I believe this is gonna be like on-prem. If you're dealing with the on-prem SQL Server, SharePoint, pretty much, not SQL Server, but you're dealing with a SharePoint site. Assuming that you're dealing with online, you're gonna click on online, and then what you're gonna do is under authentication, under credentials, you're gonna select basic. If you select basic, it's literally as simple as put it in username, password that you use to connect to, like to log in to SharePoint. So like anytime you connect to SharePoint via the browser, you have to go to like the Office, 365.com URL or whatever that the login is. Then you got to put in your email. Most likely going to be your email and then your password. That's exactly what this would be here if you choose basic. If you have a lot of other policies in place, that is where you could probably do app only or ADFS, and this is where you provide some other details. I would probably I will start out with the basic first, see if that works, and ultimately, if somebody from IT, like later on, you could get somebody that's probably more like an admin for SharePoint or something, if they want to create some sort of like the Azure application, right? Get that set up. They could provide you the app ID, and ultimately that application could be limited to only have access to SharePoint or whatever, right? But again, that's something that's a little more advanced, and you may have to get with other people in your company to kind of help you set all that up. But nevertheless, I will start off with basic. It's literally email, password. That's it. Once you hit save, you could test it out over here to make sure that it's able to log in and connect properly. And if it is, you're done. Like your connection is done. So now what that means is when you create, again, if I go to the job and you create a task that requires you to connect to SharePoint, and in this case we're going to download files from SharePoint, that's where you're just going to select your connection. The connection, as you could tell, it's pinpointing to, oh man, I didn't show you that either. Damn it. When you create, whenever you create your connection, my bad. Nope. Yeah, you create your connection. That's what this is. And then of course, see down here where it says source files. Once you connect to the right connection, like put in your credentials and set up your connection, you can just select the folder icon. Unless you know the path already. But if you don't know what it is, just click on the folder. What this actually does, it's connecting automatically to my SharePoint. That's why it's taking a while. And then from here, you could just kind of hit, refresh? Or what else? Let's see. Yeah, let me hit refresh. And then ultimately, there it shows all my files, my folders that relate to SharePoint. In SharePoint, where all of your documents start, your folders will be under shared documents. So I could double click. And then of course I got my my forms and my YouTube folder. And then of course from here, you find whatever folder you want to be pulling files from. Until you find it, then you just hit OK, hit the little arrow button, select folder, and that's ultimately will be what will get placed over here. Then of course the wildcard is star because I just want all the files that exist there. But if you just want to download specific files, then this is where you can use the wildcard to kind of put which files you want. Kind of be more specific with the wildcard as well. So hopefully that kind of gives a little bit more insight. It's pretty straightforward. It's not too bad when you think about it. Right? It's ultimately a matter of just creating your connection. And then as you create your connection, then you can reuse that connection over and over again for different things. In this case, you could use it to download files from Sharepoint. Maybe you're going to upload files to Sharepoint. You could use that connection for that, right? Just makes it easier to reuse over and over again. I like this app, dude. I really do. I've been using it. I like it a lot. It is feature rich. I'm not going to say it's the best app out there. I think that's very subjective, but I think for what it does and the functionality that you get out of it, I think it's very worth, to take a look into it for sure. And again, there is other features that you could do with it that I haven't done, but I know I have read about doing. Like, for example, if I go back to the visual crones, there's a way to access it to the web. I don't know if it showed that under the features. Features maybe. Easy to use interface, but I believe it does have the ability to access the interface via the browser. But you do have to set it up that you do. I would, again, I think in your case, I wouldn't worry too much about that. But that's something that if your company decides to invest into it, then you could have somebody as well to help you out from your team to set that up, right? It's a matter of just kind of installing a separate application, I believe, and just doing some small configurations, and ultimately that gives you like the browser version as well. So people don't technically have to connect to the remote server. They got to make changes. They could just access it to do the browser. So again, it's a nice app, man, and the price has went up. I'm wondering why it went up though. I wondered if they started to see that, hey, we're losing money. We're people buying our app, but they don't ever renew again, maybe, and they like, hey, we need to find a way to, to get money back. And then of course the price went up too. It was, I'm telling you, man, it was like $1,600 when I bought it. Now it's almost double. So maybe there's a demand for it. It's a nice tool. I like it. Maybe that's why, man. Who knows? But the price did go up for sure. Let's see. All right, man. No, I'm glad that it's helping you out. So hopefully you can use it in your job, and it should kind of make things a lot easier for sure. See you Friday. Maybe we could cover the Lambda part to trigger glue each time S3 bucket. Yeah, we could look into that. Try to see what we could do for that to kind of anytime something drops, it'll run. Find it, I guess. The way we have the job scheduled today, right now, every time the job runs, by default, is going to rebuild your table automatically, right? It's going to do all of that automatically. If you decide to use another approach where maybe files are being dropped, or for example, I'm just trying to think, like maybe even like if people are manually dropping files into the folder, like that would be a good example, and you want that to trigger like the glue job and things of that nature, then for sure, again, you can use it different ways, right? But yeah, I think that's something we could touch bases on Friday. We'll kind of test that out, review that, and kind of go from there. But all right, man, thanks for joining the live stream again. I'll be on Friday 9 p.m. Central, and that will be our drinking with Lou. So I'll be drinking tequila, and then we'll be getting